And welcome to the second part of South Texas Crossfire. This is Attorney Joe Flores reminding you to join us each and every week right here on KTMV. Thanks to the Lopez family, Channel 6, Time Warner making this happen. And don't forget about their station K Alamo, Channel 21 in San Antonio, and KVTV. You're seeing us in Laredo, CBS, right after CSI and right before Wheel of Fortune. If you're just tuning in, our last segment, we had Benny Agosto, a partner at Abraham and Watkins, one of the oldest and most respected firms in Houston, Texas. And now I have the distinct pleasure of bringing yet another mentor and colleague of mine, Mr. Randy Sorrels. Mr. Randall Sorrels was the head or president of the Houston Bar Association, formerly of Fulbright Jaworski. He came over, as I like to say, to the good side of the force. Welcome, Randy. How are you?
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hey, and he's also a good golfer. So you golf fans out there, he's a hell of a golfer there. I was telling Benny that I had interviewed T. Gerald Treese, one of my mentors, one of yours, one of Benny's. And one of the things we're talking about is advocacy. And a lot of people have this negative connotation about personal injury lawyers. But when they see, someone like you in the courtroom, someone who's fighting for people's rights, a lot of the time, those people, if they haven't had an injury, they've had somebody who's had one, or their son or their daughter. How do you respond to everything that's been going on that's trying to separate a lawyer from their client here in this climate in the last few years?
Well, I think, Joe, that it's pretty clear that the people of this state need good representation. The state has an interest in having good representation given. The problem is there are certain special interests, there are certain private organizations that don't want to have the common man represented by a good lawyer. And that's to benefit their own pocketbook. So what we're trying to do through initiatives is to educate the public that it's important that you're able to hire the lawyer that you want to hire, the very, very best lawyer available to you. And we're counterattacking now, quite frankly. We're getting the message out. Some legislation is now trickled up through the system, and people are seeing how bad it really is.
Well, and you bring up a good point, because since 2003, since Proposition 12, which everybody thought was just to limit doctors' liability, in fact, it has rubber stamped a lot of other kinds of litigation, and there's other, technical issues like you get credit for other, sources that pay your compensation for your injuries. A lot of other hidden things that the public just did not know about that are happening, the aftermath now, 5 years later. It's not just about medical malpractice, which in my opinion, and that necessarily doesn't reflect that of the station, but that has closed the courthouse doors to many elderly people that don't have economic wages. But it's also affected other types of law. And if you could tell the audience a little bit about how those changes in Proposition 12 and House Bill 4 in 2003, how that affected other types of law other than med-mal.
Well, med-mal is the clearest example, because we have seen over the last 5 years, even though the laws of medical malpractice changed, the actual consequences of medical malpractice have not changed. And the people who are hurt the most in a medical malpractice situation are also hurt the most in the medical malpractice laws. They're capped on damages, and it's extremely unfair. Fortunately or unfortunately for those folks who are a victim of medical malpractice, a lot of people who have money, so to speak, who helped create this law, they are becoming victims of medical malpractice, or they know someone close to them who are becoming victims of medical malpractice, and they're concerned and they're recognizing this law, this cap on damages, is really unfair.
Well, and they try to make, and I think it fell short of the mark, they tried to make a law that was going to affect it just like that throughout the whole 50 states. And I know the Association for Justice, formerly the Association of Trial Lawyers of America, was really an advocate on that. And I know that our own organization here, Texas Trial Lawyers, has been really at the forefront, as you have, in trying to stop this draconian legislation that could spill over into other parts of the law, but or it can affect other people for different types of injuries. Now, to explain a little bit to the public out there, Abraham and Watkins doesn't just do medical malpractice. I know you're very well informed in that area. You've handled a lot of cases on that, but also pharmaceuticals. That's something that I've heard the word on the street, Randy, is they're trying to preempt, or trying to say if the FDA gives a thumbs up on certain pharmaceuticals that you'll be totally out in the cold and you can't sue them. Is that correct?
That's true. And in our country right now, with a Republican president and for a long time in the past a Republican Congress, they really weren't giving us the Republican values that we expected. Republican values are small government, leave everything to the states. But in this instance, to benefit the major companies, the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical manufacturers, they're making an exception and they're expanding national law. And they're saying we, the federal government, can tell you, the states, no, you can't sue the drug manufacturers, the manufacturers of Vioxx, the manufacturers of Fen-Phen, the people who knew that there were dangerous side effects to their drugs but chose not to tell the public until much, much later. And we think this is being untrue to those Republicans who voted for a smaller government, leaving states' rights as one of the biggest platforms. That and some budgetary issues really cause me, and I often vote for some really good Republicans to question their platform.
Well, and that's very true. I mean, we have to look at the agenda, the corporate America, the pharmaceutical companies, and as Mr. Agosto said, a lot of these companies do a lot of good. A lot of these companies are there to make money, and plaintiff attorneys or trial attorneys aren't out there to put everybody out of business, but they have to be held accountable. And with that being said, we've got to look at this preemption that could happen and take away your rights. We've talked about this in previous shows, and it's an important message that we have to send out there that people are going to be very much affected by this. With that being said, what about the issue of where pharmaceuticals are being made? I mean, we're hearing in the media that some of the pharmaceutical ingredients or the processing is happening in China, and then I heard the irony, FDA said, oh, we'll make a field office over there. They're handling about 15 or 20%, Randy, of oversight. That's all they can handle. They're overworked, underpaid, and they're not being able to see all of the consequences of how these pharmaceutical companies are operating. How would that affect the preemption, affect the consumer if they were injured?
Well, the FDA, they do with what resources they have as much as they possibly can. There's no doubt in my mind. But the truth of the matter is a private watchdog industry is a much better overseer of the manufacturers of pharmaceuticals, especially when they're going overseas or even across the border, either way, north or south across the border. That private industry, that private watchdog often is the trial lawyers, the people who are grading the papers, who are looking into the studies, who take time to dig deep into the facts of each and every case, as opposed to the FDA, which only with its limited resources can superficially look over the surface of the issues.
Well, and that watchdog group, you know, and I've advocated, Dean Treese has advocated, many other lawyers have said that citizens themselves need to get some grassroots groups together to oversee the pharmaceutical companies and bring it to their legislature's attention, their senators, their congressmen. It starts with the politics. And a lot of these people that we've gotten out on our program have in fact said, yeah, I contacted my representatives and I told them that this is wrong. And ladies and gentlemen out there, we know that the price at the pump is out of control. We know that a gallon of milk and a gallon of gas are costing the same thing, and we're all worrying about how we're going to pay our bills. But we can't lose sight of the fact that we have to maintain our courthouse doors open. Like Dean Treese brought up in a previous program, all of these consumer rights that we have, Texas has a great system for that, but we need to prevent any further inhibition of our day in court. And you know, I've seen you in action. I know you've tried many cases. You're board certified, I think double board now.
Right.
You know, I've seen you and how you advocate. And one of the things that I've seen that I admire most is that a lot of the clients that you take on, they couldn't come and bring a lawsuit without your help or you actually putting out your checkbook and writing a check and advancing the litigation for several years. And now they want to do away with that. What's your view on the contingency system we have today?